Molly here. Over the past couple of weeks, we have experienced unprecedented growth on this channel, and I just want to welcome everyone who's new here and thank those of you who have been with us for years. The videos we make are only part of the equation. It's you guys who make the comment section such an interesting exchange of ideas. This channel wouldn't be what it is without you guys, so thank you. Now, on to the business of this week's episode. First, we will recap. Then, we will do our review. There will be bookmarks to navigate, but I highly recommend listening to the recap. So, this week's episode. The premise could have been great, but the execution left a lot to be desired. Let's dive in. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 5, Through the Lens of Time. The episode begins with the new nurse, Dana Gamble, giving a junior medical officer's log. In the narrative, we learn that he's now been on the Enterprise for 6 months. So it's been 3 months since Episode 2 took place. And he states that after today, his life will never be the same again. Nurse Chapel and Dr. Corby are heading up an archaeological dig. And allegedly, it is going to make history and change the way they view mortality, with his work on molecular memory and corporeal transference. Basically, they're searching for medical technology from ancient astronauts to see if they have the key to immortality. So, we have Nurse Chapel and Roger Corby walking down the corridor of the Enterprise. And Corby is all nervous, and Chapel is the calm voice of reason, because Corby always gets nervous before a dig. Corby steps into the turbolift as La'an is stepping out. Nurse Chapel follows La'an and asks her how Spock is doing. And I rolled my eyes so hard that I almost fell off the couch. And I was reminded that this show is a soap opera for teenagers. The scene between La'an and Chapel was painful to watch. Chapel asking if Spock has said anything to La'an about her and Roger. All that was missing was lockers lining the hallway. It was just that juvenile. La'an tells Chapel that she and Spock are just having fun without labels, and asks her not to make it weird. While we, as the audience, know it is way too late for that. La'an tells Chapel if she's really worried about how Spock is going to behave around Corby, to ask Spock, because they're all adults. Back in sickbay, Captain Battel's treatments for the Gorn infection appear to be going well, and Dr. M'Benga tells Nurse Gamble that he's going on the away mission, and he's as giddy as a schoolgirl, and gives Dr. M'Benga a big hug, and the old man turned to me and said, "Is this what we can expect from Starfleet Academy?" And I said, "Yup." In his log, Nurse Gamble says it is his first away mission on an alien planet, and he's been dreaming of this since he was first accepted to Starfleet Academy. And now it's his time to shine. In the next scene, Nurse Chapel and Spock are in the same turbolift, and it's super awkward and uncomfortable. And then Nurse Chapel says, "Why are we always so quiet when we need to talk?" And Spock says, "Is there something to discuss?" And Nurse Chapel says she's glad to see him and Lieutenant Noonien Singh spending more time together. And Spock says she is an excellent dance instructor. And Nurse Chapel says that too. And Spock just looks at her, and then Nurse Chapel says, "Roger's feeling nervous about the dig." And she knows Spock and Roger are like friends now, and Spock responds, "A relative term." And Chapel continues that she just wants things to go smoothly down on the planet. And Spock says, "You do not trust me," and tells her not to worry because he's put safeguards in place to ensure all goes smoothly. And she asks him what he means by safeguards. Then the turbolift doors open and Nurse Gamble gets in the lift. And he realizes he interrupted them, and they all awkwardly stand there. The briefing establishes this is Nurse Chapel's mission. Spock is going to monitor from the ship. Ortegas's brother, Beto, is documenting the whole thing, and Pelia is a huge ham for the camera. At 9 minutes in, they finally make it down to the planet. It's Roger Corby, Nurse Chapel, Nurse Gamble, Uhura, Beto, and one of the aliens from the planet. They blast a bunch of stone using the Enterprise and reveal what looks like a temple or something. Nurse Chapel then says, "Captain, we're going to need a bigger landing party." The aliens only allow 2 more to come down, so it's Spock and La'an. Dr. Corby has like a bracelet or something that he found somewhere else, and Uhura hangs on to it. Tablets and stuff for this place have been found on multiple planets, and they actually say ancient astronauts in the episode, which reminded me of the speculative shows that somehow found their way onto the History Channel. And these ancient astronauts claimed to have achieved immortality. Spock dismisses it as a common myth, but Chapel and Corby say these ancient astronauts know the secret to immortality, and it had something to do with creating quantum instability at a molecular level. And La'an says, "Fascinating," just like Spock usually does. And Nurse Chapel just looks at her. So Uhura translates writing by the door, and the way to open the door is with blood given freely. So Nurse Chapel offers up her own blood, freely given, as a sacrifice to get through the door, which kind of reminded me of Harry Potter when Voldemort got his body back in the Goblet of Fire. The door opens, and they all go inside. Comms and the transporter don't work inside the chamber. Nurse Gamble finds some dead bodies on the floor. It's ascertained that they starved to death over a century ago. Spock wants to notify the Enterprise, but Chapel argues with him, saying trust is a two-way street, Spock, and convinces him not to. So then Nurse Chapel searches the body's belongings and finds a tablet, and Nurse Gamble picks up a glowing orb and looks at it. The thing explodes in his hand, and in grand New Trek tradition, his eyes get burned out. Nurse Gamble then gets sent back to the ship, and Dr. Mbenga puts a visor on him to try to grow his eyes back. But not only do his eyes not grow back, he appears to be going brain dead, but he's still somehow alert and talking. The rest of the team members are supposed to beam back up, but they dilly-dally. Roger says he and the alien are going to stay behind. Beto says he sent his drone into another room that they couldn't see into, so they all look at the footage. The alien gets upset, says something about evil, and tries to run out the door, only to be vaporized by a weapon above the door, and the door closes, and they're all trapped. Not wanting to starve to death, the group decides the best thing to do is go through into the dark room that the alien had been so afraid of. As they go through the arch, the groups get separated. La'an and Nurse Chapel are together, Spock and Kirby are together, and Uhura and Beto are together. In the background, it's like Hogwarts, or Inception, with the building rearranging itself. But their communicators do still work. La'an and Chapel are in a room with a statue written in Chinese on the base. It reads, "Here stands the beholder, century of eternal bridges." And the statue has a life sign reading. It's technically both alive and not. And it's not really there. On the quantum level, the particles that make up the beholder are in constant flux, which reminded me of Doctor Who, because there's nearly always something in a state of flux on the rebooted Doctor Who. Spock and Corby realize the door in their room has a bridge going to it, but they're not going to risk it after the alien got vaporized. Kirby picks up the plaque the dead people on the floor had, and he translates it to read something about parasites or hitchhikers, a well or a pit, and evil plural. Spock got a visor off one of the bodies and looks through it. In the console, in the middle of the room, he sees thousands of the little balls like the one that exploded and took out Nurse Gamble's eyes. One floats up, and inside it, Spock sees the same Gorn baby thing he saw when he mind-melded with Captain Batel. Back on the Enterprise, Pelia states the ball that Nurse Gamble encountered is a containment unit, and the energy that had been trapped inside forced its way out. And it might be sentient. It's older than anything Pelia has ever seen, and it gives her the heebie-jeebies. Meanwhile, in sickbay, it's clear Nurse Gamble is not himself. Captain Batel walks in, and something else takes over her as well. And she and Gamble start speaking a different language to each other, and then they fight. Mbenga manages to sedate Battelle, but Gamble has taken off down the corridor. Gamble appears to have killed one red shirt and has a phaser on another. Mbenga convinces him to surrender, and they put him in the brig. But he manages to escape. Back on the planet, Spock has a cut on his hand, but no idea where it came from. Uhura figures out they're all in the same room, just out of phase with each other. Corby and Spock put the plaque in a place where it fits on the console. Uhura puts the bracelet on the console, and Nurse Chapel is the key to all of it, and she puts the ring where it fits into the plaque, and something that looks like an hourglass made of crystals appears, and they're all back together again. Spock notices his hand is healed, but the bridge to the door is now gone. Spock reaches under the console and cuts his hand. He realizes they're in a space with inverted causality, where effects can happen before cause. They must walk across the empty space to get to the Holy Grail. Oh wait, that's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Here, they have to walk across empty space to turn on the bridge. So Indiana, Chapel, and La'an step off into nothing, and the bridge appears, Chapel opens the door, and they all leave. Back on the ship, Nurse Gamble has Sam Kirk, Pelia, and Scotty at gunpoint, and is demanding the command codes. Mbenga shows up with a phaser, and he and Gamble are in a standoff. Mbenga is lowering his phaser, and Gamble is about to shoot him, when Pelia shoots Gamble in the back. Whatever was controlling Gamble leaves his body. Scotty traps it in a new orb, and then stores it in the transport buffer. Gamble is dead. The Federation and the people on the planet are going to work together to secure the site. Beto asks if the entities are evil, and Pike says good and evil are relative terms. But Pelia disagrees and gives a little speech. But then she asks Beto if he wants her to give a take for his camera. The episode ends with Mbenga contacting Gamble's family, the console behind Mbenga glitching in the background. It was also established that Battelle reacted to Gamble like she did because of her Gorn DNA. The end. In a way, this was both one of the best episodes and one of the worst episodes. One of the best episodes because it actually had pieces there that I think could have been a great episode. That's also what makes it one of the worst episodes, because it is super disappointing when you can see that they had the tools to do something good, but failed when it came to execution.
I agree. I think this was probably the best episode, not only this season, but toward the top of the entire run. It's a shame because when they do episodes like this that has a basis for being a good episode, that's the part that makes me sad, because when they do the slop like they have done all season, I'm able to just kind of go, yep, this is the garbage that they do, big deal. But you see something like this, you see decent visual effects, you see possibly an interesting story idea, then you can just start thinking about, well, imagine what this series could be if it was well written.
They spent 9 minutes on interpersonal crap before they even got down to the planet.
The start of this episode was bad. Really bad. The high school jealousy, hallway, whatever they were doing there, it was embarrassing. This was a bad setup.
And even once they got to the planet, there were times where I just, like I said, rolled my eyes so hard I almost fell off the couch. Because it was clear that this was more about their weird interpersonal crap than it was about the archaeological dig and professionalism and everything that I used to expect from Star Trek on an away mission. At one point, I didn't include it in the recap, but Spock actually said that Corby fails to take proper precautions, like safety precautions. I don't disagree, because this, obviously, a crew member got killed. He never should have been down there. Why was he poking through stuff? And then he picks it up and it explodes in his eyes. Come on. It felt like it was a bunch of kids screwing around in some... Well, honestly, it was kind of like oh God, I don't remember, what was that called? That Star Wars where the kids find that ship. Yeah, it reminded me of Skeleton Crew, because Nurse Chapel and the rest, their mentality was the same level of maturity that the kids on Skeleton Crew had. That's how they were poking around in an artifact, just like those kids were. And look how it turned out.
I couldn't believe after that nurse got his eyes burned out, which, as you pointed out, this is yet another eyeball thing that Secret Hideout seems to be obsessed with, is eyeballs, disfiguring eyeballs in particular, and we got 2 of them that were done here. But after they saw what happened to the nurse, then Spock picks up that visor thing and sticks it up to his face, and then another one of those glowy things comes up, and he doesn't turn away. That's the same thing just a few minutes ago blinded his crewmate. Picking apart goofs, I guess, like that, or logic goofs, is pointless with this show. When I give it credit, I give it credit for, well, there was the beginning of a premise here.
And like I said in the recap, there were times when I'm like, oh, well, this feels exactly like, this property here. And in this one, I think the most egregious for me in this episode was the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style of stepping off into nothing, and then there's actually the bridge under their feet.
Well, it was more than that. It wasn't just the invisible bridge, but you had to use faith to solve the puzzle, which is to take that extra step on faith that the bridge was going to be there. That was both in this episode, and that was in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So that was a blatant ripoff. There was another blatant ripoff, too, which I'm guessing is homage, but I just shrugged my shoulders when Nurse Chapel said, I think we're going to need a bigger landing crew.
Yeah, that was clearly from Jaws. Overall, this episode really felt like the Next Generation episode Power Play, where they go down to that planet, they get possessed by prisoners, and the prisoners want to escape the planet, basically, and they're using possessed members of the crew to do it. It felt a lot like that to me.
There was a little bit of the Season 7 Masks episode, too. But both of those, it wasn't like a direct ripoff like they usually do. So it had feelings once in a while, but at least it wasn't like that Indiana Jones bridge thing. It wasn't like a direct in-your-face ripoff, which is what they usually do on this show. So I guess that's praise, sort of.
Well, it comes back around to all these elements that, at least for me, feel like they've been clearly lifted from other places instead of coming up with their own original ideas. Personally, I don't think that a writer would just go through all these different properties and just take elements and write a story. To me, that really feels like an algorithm picked out those elements and wrote an outline for a story. So, again, to me, this just feels like they're using AI. But, again, I have no proof of that. It's just my opinion. It's just how I feel about that.
Yeah, because there were other elements here. A little bit of it felt like the mood that was in that John Carpenter movie from the 80s, Prince of Darkness. There were like little pieces of things that just, for a quick moment, reminded me of something, but then it moved on to something else. So, I agree with you. This episode, to me, wasn't offensive after the high school stuff was done. But when I was done, I looked at Molly and said, I've seen this episode before, but I'm not sure where. And I think afterwards we talked about it a little bit, and I think we both agreed, yeah, we saw it because there were so many inspirations taken from other properties, but not the direct lifting they usually do. That's why for this episode, except for the Jaws line, which I think even they would acknowledge was on purpose.
A lot of different properties do that. That one is homage.
And the Indiana Jones one, which I don't think was homage, I think that was actually ripping off. I guess they don't think anybody watched Indiana Jones. It's just a small property, and probably nobody's ever watched those movies before.
Yeah, I sat there in the theater and I watched that film when it first came out.
That's a compliment, I guess. This episode was not the worst thing I've ever seen. Pike actually had his moments where he didn't have somebody knocking him down. He was actually giving advice to Dr. Mbenga, and he almost felt like a leader.
But then in the scenes where Pelia was with him, it seemed like she was the one running the show. She just steamrolled right over him.
And Dr. Mbenga himself was doing doctor work, not Nurse Chapel.
That was nice to see. However, then the relationship that he had with Nurse Gamble was weird. And like you pointed out, is this what we can expect from Starfleet Academy? Because it felt more like Nurse Gamble wasn't a real officer. I mean, it says he's junior medical officer, but he's clearly been through Starfleet Academy, and he's acting like he's a freshman or something. I mean, it was really... I didn't like the feeling of that. It felt so unprofessional. And the way he was behaving down on the planet, they had him acting all awkward and excited like a child. But that goes right along with all that relationship stuff, like it was high school or something. And it's just not what I want from my Star Trek. You know, again, like, if they're going to do that in something like Starfleet Academy and actually aim it toward middle schoolers, okay, fine, I won't watch that. But they kept telling us this is supposed to be Strange New Worlds is for the old school fans. Yet they have the characters behaving like they're 15.
Yeah. Because I agree with you that we talked about this a little bit last night. This series has turned into the Nurse Chapel show. And when you go back and you look at the other episodes, it kind of has that Michael Burnham, this is her story. I mean, Michael Burnham was out front. You had no way of not knowing that's about Michael Burnham. Here they kind of backdoored the whole thing as far as they tricked you into thinking this was going to be Pike's show and about his starship. And it's not. It's about Nurse Chapel. When you go back and you look at the episodes, for the most part, this is about Nurse Chapel. This is Nurse Chapel's story. Even
when she was gone for 3 months, they just didn't have any episodes. They didn't have any episodes till she came back. So yeah, this really feels like it's the Nurse Chapel show.
And I don't understand why they're doing that. If they were going to center on Majel Barrett's character because they're trying to right a wrong, again, that goes back to last week's review.
Which I don't think that's the case, but continue.
Then why don't they center on Una more? Because that was who Majel Barrett played in The Cage, and at least you'd be centering on the second in command, so at least that would make more sense than some nurse in sickbay being the center of the show.
I think it's because Rebecca Romaine is too old. I think she's outside of the demographic that they're actually trying to target. The lady that plays Nurse Chapel, I think she is what they're trying to get.
Because after watching this episode, both Molly and I, we looked at each other and said, yeah, this is the Nurse Chapel show. Not just for this week, but you look back at the other episodes and it becomes clear once you have that mindset that, hey, I'm going to look to see if this is the Nurse Chapel show. And it is. She is the lead of the show, despite what the credits might show as far as ordering of who lists first.
And my real question is, she spent 3 months under Roger Corby having that fellowship with him. So why was she leading this mission? Why was this her expedition? And then when they're all ordered to go back, he wants to stay there with the alien and keep investigating. This is her show, not his, so why is he trying to dictate those terms? But again, like I said, it should have been his expedition. He was down on the planet before she came down. He was down there talking to the aliens, well, the people who lived on the planet. So why? Well, we all know why this was hers.
And that's the thing, too, is the Corby stuff, if we just didn't have him as Corby and we had him as somebody else, an archaeologist that was exploring a new rune, this reminded me quite a bit in a positive way of some of the TNG episodes that had Picard doing archaeology stuff. And again, that's one of those things that makes me sad because you see that and you're like, what could be here? And then you look and see what is here. Because I don't understand at all what Nurse Chapel, as being a recent understudy of Corby for like summer break, how she was not only on the expedition, but she was leading the expedition, at least the way she was giving orders and recommendations to people.
Yeah, and Corby was nervous before the dig, and she's trying to calm him down. Oh, it was so gross. It really rubbed me the wrong way.
Because if this would have been Corby and Spock's show on the planet, with maybe Discount Drummer being down there for security reasons, this could have been a Star Trek episode. Could have been. It wasn't, but it could have been. There was a lot of ingredients here that could have happened.
Yeah, this came close to being a decent episode. But again, all the interpersonal drama crap, that just negates all the rest of it.
I think that's exactly what Starfleet Academy is going to be. The beginning part, when they were still on the ship having their, is he talking about me? That type of stuff. That's, I think, what Starfleet Academy is going to be. And I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. We'll watch at least the beginning of it to see if it's any good. But I'm not interested in that stuff.
It's not going to be any good. I mean, I'll give it a chance just to see, but man, from what I've seen so far, it looks like it's going to be really, really bad.
Because you had the formula here, you had the students, and then you had the teachers, because Mbenga and Corby functioned as the teachers, and then you had Chapel and Nurse Gamble functioning as the students. And you could see how this is going to go down with Starfleet Academy. It's just interesting the past couple of weeks what they've set up as far as what they're planning for the next stage of this whole secret hideout endeavor.
And I do feel it was in bad taste to have Nurse Gamble giving the junior medical officer's log at the beginning and talking about how it was going to change his life that day and all that kind of stuff. They were really, really trying to up the emotional aspects of this. And all it did was turn me off.
I don't have anything here to get enraged by because they didn't do anything here to insult me directly. But this was a wasted opportunity. It reminded me of last season when they had that episode where Una was on trial for her genetics. And I could tell, and I even said so in the review, that they were trying to make a Star Trek episode. Like, you could tell they were trying really hard to give us that courtroom episode that Star Trek's known for, at least in some of the iterations. And they couldn't pull it off. But I gave them credit in the review. I could tell they were actually trying to make a good episode. I think the same here. I think they were trying to make a good episode. They just don't have the skill to do it.
Yeah, because they have the pieces, but they just can't do it. They just can't. And this, as far as I'm concerned, is just proof that they can't. Even when they have all the pieces there, they just can't do it.
And if they can't do it here, they're never going to do it.
No, they're not. So this is actually a bit depressing because of that clear realization, which, again, we've known this all along, but now it's confirmed. And it's one thing to know something, but it's another thing to know something. And now we know for certain they're never going to get this right.
No, you can tell. This was the last effort on their part, I think, to try to tell a proper story. And it's just clear they can't. They try, they just can't. And I think that's been our biggest critique here, is the writing on this show, actually all of Secret Hideout's shows, is where the problem is. The actors, for the most part, are fine. Some of them are actually pretty good. It's not that. The visuals I'm not crazy about, the art direction they took, but what they present on the screen for what they're trying to present looks good enough. It's the writing. That's where all these things fail. And it's a shame because until they get better writing in here, all you're going to do with different iterations of the same Secret Hideout formula, you're going to get the same thing. You're going to get there was potential here, but it fell short because of the writing. Every single one of these series, the same thing happened. It fell short because of the writing. You had the TNG crew in season 3 of Picard. Where did it fall apart? The writing. I know there are lots of people out there that don't want to admit that, but it's the writing. And they had the TNG crew, and we know the TNG crew can do good work. They did in TNG. They just couldn't in season 3. Why? Because of the writing.
Yeah.
And you look at what's happening on this show, and we've seen several of these actors in different things. I'd be interested to see Christina Chong in something else, because honestly, from my point of view, they can try to push Nurse Chapel's actress all they want. I think Christina Chong is the actual breakout actor of this series, and I think after this series, I think she's got a big career ahead of her.
I certainly hope so. I really do. I got nothing else to say about this.
It was honestly a nothing burger.
Yeah. So, yeah, hey, if you want to look at it and see the pieces to what could have been a great episode, go ahead. But if you don't want to see the teenage romance drama, then do not watch this. So, until next week.
Take care.